All right, let's talk about something terrifying, something threatening the very fabric of our society. Free speech. Yes, folks, according to Margaret Brennan of Face the Nation, the real danger isn't censorship, it's free speech. That's right, free speech. You know, the thing that lets us argue about nonsense online, complain about our bosses, and make fun of politicians on X, you know, the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, without being dragged off in the middle of the night. Too much of that, and apparently we're just one tweet away from full-blown genocide. That's today's Faith Check News.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Tuttamore, and this is Faith Check News, where we frame the news through the lens of God's truth, because we want to spark a lively conversation and invite you into a community of people who want to learn to think right, to live free. Look, I get it, folks. People say stupid things. This is America. We invented stupid things, like camouflage golf balls. This $6,000 throne of your dreams with a heated seat, foot warmer, and built-in speakers. And of course, Barney the dinosaur.
I love you.
But saying free speech leads to genocide is like saying gym memberships lead to obesity. And the best part, Margaret Brennan is a journalist. A journalist saying free speech is dangerous is like a firefighter saying, you know what the real problem is? Water. So here's what happened. At the Munich Security Conference, Vice President J.D. Vance said the real threat to Europe wasn't from Russia or China, but from inside their own governments, because they decided to fight bad ideas by banning all ideas. Margaret Brennan, doing her best Big Brother impression, says, well, actually, free speech is the danger.
He was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship was specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history.
Right. Because when I think of Adolf Hitler, I think of a man who just really loved Snapchat. Look, Margaret, free speech didn't cause the Holocaust. Censorship did. The Nazis didn't win the argument. They banned the argument, then burned the books, jailed the opposition, and made disagreeing a crime. That's not what happens in a country with too much free speech. That's what happens when you don't have enough. History is very clear on this. Censorship is the keto diet of political strategy. It never works the way you think it will. In 1765, Britain thought, we'll just tax newspapers to keep those rowdy Americans from getting any radical ideas. And in 1776, we were throwing their tea into the ocean and making bald eagles our national mood. Nazi Germany tried the same thing. The first task on Hitler's to-do list after taking power was to ban independent media and criminalize dissent with the Reich Press Law of 1933. Because when you control all speech, guess what happens? You get to rewrite history, which brings us to modern Europe, where free speech is apparently on life support. Germany and France, in their infinite wisdom, have decided that the best way to fight fascism is to embrace their inner fascist. Germany's criminal code, section 185, makes it illegal to insult someone. Good luck being a comedian over there. France's hate speech laws force social media companies to remove offensive content within 24 hours or face government fines. France used to be the land of Voltaire, where they defend your right to say anything. Now, say the wrong thing and you're fined, arrested, or worse, banned from social media. So I guess free speech in France is just a charade, and not even a good one, because at least the mime's committed to the act. Every government that has ever pushed censorship claims it's for the public good. Spoiler alert, it's never for the public good. The real reason governments suddenly care about misinformation or hate speech is because people are fed up with their BS, their bologna sandwiches. Maybe because their leaders are incompetent, maybe because people are tired of being lied to, or maybe, just maybe, because they don't want their kids growing up in a country where the only approved opinion is the government's opinion. The reason the American Revolution succeeded is because the founders understood something radical. Government doesn't grant rights, God does. The Declaration of Independence literally says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." Now that's radical thinking today. Saying your rights come from God instead of a bureaucrat in Brussels will get you labeled an extremist in Europe. But this idea isn't just from the founders. It came straight from the Bible. Genesis 1:27 says, "So God created man in his own image. As I like to say, God created us in love with purpose." And that means no government has the right to take away your free speech. In Exodus 23, it says, "You shall have no other gods before me." It's essentially the biblical origin of the conscience clause, meaning I don't have to bow down to your ideology, your speech codes, or your ridiculous laws. So let's just step back and ask, how did we get to a place in the United States where a journalist whose entire job is free speech believes that free speech is dangerous? Do you want to know who else thought free speech was dangerous? Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Ministry of Propaganda. He once said, "Think of the press as a great keyboard on which the government can play." And in Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler wrote, "The most brilliant propagandist technique will yield no success unless one fundamental principle is borne in mind constantly. It must confine itself to a few points and repeat them over and over and over." Sound familiar? In 2017, it was Russia, Russia, Russia. Then we found out the Clinton campaign paid for the Steele dossier. In 2021, it was the pandemic of the unvaccinated, until the data showed us the vaccinated were more likely to get sick again. They told us Biden's trillion-dollar spending would be anti-inflationary until it hit a 40-year high. And last year, the fundamental principle was that Trump was a threat to democracy. Well, democracy elected President Trump. I'm just saying. Censorship wasn't just a tool for the Nazis. It was the foundation of their power. And now we see governments around the world doing the same thing, criminalizing speech, punishing dissent, and calling it safety. That's like a burglar installing your home security system and saying, "Trust me, you're in good hands." Because nothing says safety like handing total control to the guy who plans to rob you blind. The weaponization of free speech did not lead to genocide. The weaponization of fear has been used to justify censorship. In the Old Testament, King Solomon said, "There's nothing new under the sun," because even if history doesn't repeat, it sure does rhyme. So if we don't wake up and stand up to journalists, we'll be teaching our children a 1939 nursery rhyme from the Third Reich. That's today's Faith Check News. I'm Brian Tuttimore. Remember, think right to live free.